Hello.
We've got a guest. This is our first guest on the podcast. How exciting! We're moving on up in the world. Not only have we got a new guest, but we've actually got a new mic. So we're coming at you in live and stereo.
You may have to turn your headphones down because the quality is now so good. You don't have to be on full volume and sound like we're in a tin can.
Episode 4 and we're all getting new technology.
Gifted. I don't know whether it's just from
Yeah.
looking at you two and you're both so blonde and my hair looks so dark.
I feel like my hair's getting
I
more dark.
was thinking
at the
mine
moment.
looked dark.
just winter.
Maybe it is just like dark in
I
general.
think when you've not
outside.
had sun as well, your hair goes dull, doesn't it?
This episode's a bit more of a serious one, and it is obviously a very current topic at the moment. What with coronavirus and lockdown and isolation and all that good stuff.
What we're going to do is be talking about mental health in lockdown. Rather than go too deep into coronavirus, more of how society has changed in the last year.
We won't be boring you with coronavirus stats and death tolls and all that stuff. This will be nicer, hopefully. And hopefully everyone will get something out of this, because a very important thing to remember is that we all have mental health. We all have an experience that we can talk about to do with this. What we want to be getting from this is encouraging other people to speak about this openly, as you do amongst your friends. I mean, we talk about this stuff all the time as if we were talking about the weather, and we want other people to be able to do that too. We want to normalise the subject of mental health.
And then very much in the sense that you've not seen people in the last 6 months to a year, the people you would have these open conversations with when you did meet up with them. It's a lot harder to do that just over text or FaceTime or over the phone. So, come and have this chat with us, because you might not have had the chance to have it with your friends in the last year, which is pretty grim, but that's why we're here as well. So.
And on that note, our guest speaker, Em, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm really happy to be here today because this is something I'm really passionate about. I'm currently training to be a cognitive behavioural therapist. I've spent 3 years working in the NHS as a mental health therapist, working with anxiety and depression. And then prior to that, I worked in a psychiatric unit with children.
Wow.
So lots of different jobs.
To have Em here as well, not only to get an extra female opinion, but a professional one at that. We could talk at you all day about our own experiences and what we think about this, but you're going to give us the facts and a bit more deeper explanation, hopefully. So here is what's really going on in your head.
Yeah.
And we're going to all learn something today.
This is a therapy session.
It's not heal me.
We're going to get deep on this episode. Just give a bit of a breakdown. We're going to talk about our own experiences with lockdown, and then we do want to focus on the fact that we're exposed to a lot more media, whether that be online, on the TV.
Out and about, newspapers, magazines, everything can be overwhelming, honestly.
So obviously this is really unprecedented times. We're amongst the unknown, and especially with isolation as well. A lot of people are probably turning to finding coping methods or talking to someone to get professional help. So, Em, in your job, have you found that there's been recurring themes amongst your clients?
Absolutely. I work with people with, moderate to severe mental health problems. We offer them what's called cognitive behavioural therapy. It's a specific type of therapy that looks at identifying problematic thoughts or ways of behaving, and then, working with the person to overcome some of those problematic coping strategies to help them cope with their problems in a more helpful way. Things like social anxiety, health anxiety, OCD, PTSD. Oh God, yeah, we've noticed that massively with OCD, fear of contamination.
Oh God, yeah.
Haven't a lot of people with OCD been better than they thought they would because there's more? So someone who would go into a shop and have their own hand sanitizer or put gloves on would have been looked at funny a year ago, but now
Everyone's
doing
I
it.
guess it really depends on the person. Like, there is a real fear now of contamination, so actually that supports their worry.
Whereas
it's
it
actually
could have been
harder.
irrational before.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually quite difficult then to treat.
Oh yeah. Is it the anxiety, or is it like coming from a real place almost?
Yeah,
It's like an OCD thing.
Yeah, often there's a lot of evidence against what the anxiety is, or it's extremely unlikely. But at the moment, obviously, there is a real fear, isn't there? There is a real anxiety there for people.
Really
There's a real
difficult.
threat.
So you had a patient with OCD before. The way of treatment would be almost encouraging the idea that it's not reality or that it's unlikely.
And
so what about now, when you have a patient with OCD? You can't be saying, oh, it's unlikely, it's not going to happen. Like, how does it differ?
It's very difficult, because before we'd kind of encourage people to, like, if they think, if I touch that I'm going to die, we'd encourage them to touch it to kind of weaken that link between worry. So it's so difficult to treat.
I think I'd only seen someone like like on social media say that their OCD wasn't bad anymore because the whole world was with them in the anxiety and the triggers that they had of worrying about people being too close to them, worrying about, you know, wearing gloves and being very cleanly, that they felt better because everyone else was almost up to their level of where they were with
which
that.
I get that knowledge is reassuring, but it's ultimately it's not going to get rid of the
and it depends on the triggers, doesn't it?
Absolutely, so we've had a lot more people accessing services, so even people that have never experienced a mental health problem before are coming forward with symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of depression, really high stress, increased isolation and loneliness. We've had elderly people come through. Just want to shout out to the amazing work that Age UK do for those people. Really brilliant. We've noticed like a massive increase in anxiety around finances, worrying about people's own health, and then those people also worrying about family and friends' health. Relationship issues, people arguing a lot more, spending loads of time with their partners or children,
family,
as you can imagine.
What I think is that obviously all these issues that may have been underlying that people had and they just had no idea until the year has literally stripped so much of your life back. Absolutely. That these issues have come to the surface and you've had these feelings, you didn't understand them before or you didn't experience them at all.
What's happened with being in lockdown is people's ordinary ways of coping with stress or with anxiety or whatever it is they experience, that's been taken away. So like people, for example, that go to the gym or work out as a way of managing their stress, they've not been able to do that, so actually their stress has kind of surfaced and it's become a problem.
Like being able to go to the gym, it's almost like my therapy. Release that pent-up anxiety and get those endorphins is literally a way of therapy, I suppose.
And work is for some people. One of my favourite hobbies was going out to restaurants and that's mine gone.
People like going out with their friends. That's such like a way to release stress.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's not there.
And especially when you're amongst your friends, you kind of unload a little bit on the struggles that you're facing at the moment. Like even when we see each other and we have these chats on the podcast, we feel like we've had a therapy session. And if you're not seeing your friends as much, that social interaction is really diminished and it's just completely been taken out of our lives. We don't have that space where we can just have a catch up and a chat. And you always feel better when you just have a chat with your friends.
Like we're designed to be social creatures. Like human beings aren't meant to be cooped up on their own in their house. Like we've not evolved to be that way, so it's literally going against like how we've been brought up and how we've evolved as social creatures, hasn't it? Definitely.
So Georgie, how have you found it personally?
On the whole, when you think about lockdown, for me that begins sort of end of March when that officially sort of started. I actually had gone out that last night, that Friday night. That was the night that all pubs, bars and restaurants shut, and we were in this weird little pub in Manchester and it felt like the end of the world. It felt like there was a war that was starting.
You just expected those sirens to start going.
It was very weird, impending sense of this is bad. Like we knew. And I was at home with my mum and my stepdad who his work life didn't really change. She works from home, so their kind of structure of their life had not changed. So it was very difficult to be around that because my life had changed so much. I literally was not going to work, was not seeing Ed, was not seeing anyone. It was such a bad contrast because they just didn't understand it. Coronavirus at that time was not the thing that would have affected my mental health. This was a time when you didn't even have to wear a mask to go into a shop. How weird is that to think back? The mask rule didn't come in until quite late.
I think it was summer.
It's crazy. I think Anna will agree, having that time to not having to get up in the morning and go to work. It was very strange, but I would do a lot of artwork. I was reading more than I had. This was when it was nice and sunny as well, so it is so bad to look back and think, oh, lockdown 1 was great compared to now. But it was nice. I had a nice time. And we shouldn't feel guilty for feeling like that either.
Exactly.
My mental health. Every day I was surprised at how okay I was. I was actually like, can't believe I'm not more depressed. I couldn't believe it. The only anxieties I had that came in a little bit later, like a few months in, was just work related. I think anyone on furlough would have felt similar. You're worried anyway. You don't know what's going to happen. The only really main thing I had to worry about was going back into work. And then it was kind of this bittersweet thing of, I want them to ask me to come back in, but at the same time I kind of don't. Like it was a really weird time. I think one of the main things of how I was still okay, it's because all those distractions and like outside stimulus are taken away from you. So the other usual things that would cause any stress or anxiety was public transport was a big one. I was always getting like the most random death anxiety on the tram. Sometimes I'd look up on the tram and be like, oh, I'm going to die on this tram.
Wow.
So I didn't have that. and that was great because I don't have to worry about that every day. And also organising any events or occasions. Although they're good things, they are a bit stressful. Like trying to figure out an outfit or little things like that.
So, yeah.
All of that was just taken away, so there was nothing else to worry about, which was kind of nice.
There's like no triggers.
Then all these little things started to come back into life. So going to work, for me and anyone else who probably went back to work at that time would think, oh, this is going back to normal now. But it wasn't back to normal. It was like a fake normal. So we've got a flat into Manchester, but I didn't realise doing all that so much and so close together would be so stressful and so overwhelming, but really physically stressful as moving is, because your body's like, whoa, what are you doing? Where are you? Like, you've changed your location.
Yeah.
At the time, I didn't feel stressed, but it hit me afterwards. Like, once we'd moved in and we were settled, it hit me.
It's like 2 big major life changes all in one short space of time.
Yeah.
In the middle of a pandemic.
So
that
I
is
think
a lot to deal with.
I've always felt okay until afterwards.
It seems to be the case with everything, doesn't it? It's like once you've mentally processed everything, it's like, whoa, that was a lot.
So all these changes that would happen, and throughout the whole time, literally since March, I was realising I had this delayed reaction to it rather than actually being overwhelmed at the time. My body is like a few weeks late.
It's
into
almost
the
like
reaction to it.
reverse anxiety, because anxiety is when you get anxious about a situation that's coming.
Or
Yours
like,
was
that's
you
not
getting anxious
really
about a
there.
situation that's already
Yeah.
happened. Reverse
Yeah.
anxiety.
Literally.
Female shit show, you heard it first.
Just all those things that you so took for granted a year ago.
Yeah.
Going to restaurants, going out, and it's
Going on
actually
holiday.
crazy.
It's going to be amazing when we can do those
Isn't
things.
it mad how we took for granted, like, travelling?
I know.
So much. Like getting on a plane, that's going to
Even just getting on a
mental
train
now.
and going to somewhere for the day.
I know.
Yeah.
We
And
just
you
wouldn't
that.
think twice about booking a
We'll
holiday.
feel so much
like,
more grateful.
I just can't wait for those
Once it's
other
done.
elements to be back.
Yeah.
Like we do a whole episode on like lockdown guilt as well, because like I feel
Oh,
like
yeah.
everything we say could be taken.
This
If
is
someone listened to this who like works at a restaurant that I'd go to and they've not had a job for a year,
Oh, of course.
and I'm like, oh, I'm
Everyone's
back
had-
to work, so it's fine. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
obviously everyone's experiences are different, so some people may have lost a family member, like lost a job, been really unwell in hospital with coronavirus, and some people may not have had it as bad, like they've still struggled, but you know they've got their job still, they're in like warm, comfortable homes, but it is all relative as well. Both experiences are valid, and if you've struggled with either one of those, that's okay. You know, some people feel quite guilty that they found lockdown okay and other people haven't.
yeah, I think I've got that. I think I've got
me
it.
too.
Yeah.
I feel grateful. I feel lucky. That's what it
But
is.
you do feel like that level of guilt. It's okay to have the feelings that we do have.
We should start turning that guilt into gratification.
Yeah.
Of being,
Yeah,
feeling
gratitude.
feeling grateful that we haven't struggled as much as we potentially could have done, but the things that we have struggled about are still valid.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, if we had a positive experience, to not feel guilty about that positive experience. It's just the feeling of being grateful that we had those opportunities. Pre-2020, the idea of having to stay at home for 24 hours, I don't know, like a sick day, or you just didn't have any plans. I got serious cabin fever. The feeling of being isolated, not seeing anyone, not having that social interaction, that was something that really triggered anxiety for me. Like, it really wasn't healthy for me. So then when the whole lockdown was coming up in conversation and it was a possibility, that was just overwhelming to me. Like, I was just like, that's surreal. Surely that can't happen, because I can't even hack like 24 hours. How am I supposed to hack a month? Ironically, it turned into a whole year. But that was like the thought pre-lockdown, part one. At first I thought I was really going to struggle. I thought it was going to be the worst thing ever. But in the first lockdown I was to be living alone because my flatmate moved back home and I had to be working in Manchester. I was working from home. And obviously there was also that uncertainty. We didn't know anything about it, and it was also that feeling of being so not in control, and no one was in control, not even the people that we rely on, the higher ups, the government, scientists.
They've made mistakes. It's also how are we supposed to trust them if they didn't know at
it was
the time?
almost like global uncertainty, and just that no one, no matter what level you are in society in general as this human race, no one knew what was going on. It's like
And
you
we've
couldn't
never
rely-
been through
you
that
have no one to
before.
rely
It's
on.
brand new, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's almost just like everyone did assume the worst. We thought it was all imminent death if you got coronavirus, like you were going to die. And obviously it's different now that we know more. Now being in lockdown part 3, and I look back on the past year, I feel like I've taken more positives than negatives out of the last year. I'm not ignoring the awful things that happened and how hard it was. I'm just choosing to remember the positives that came out of the situation. This time has allowed me opportunities that I otherwise wouldn't have had. Spent at home. For example, I was really into art in March before the first lockdown. I was getting really, really into painting. Obviously, I didn't know we were going to go into a lockdown, but it was just lucky timing that I had started a hobby which would have actually eventually turned into a business. And I now sell my art. I've had all this time to be able to create through being in 3 lockdowns, and that's something I'm really, really grateful for.
So many people have had that as well. Like, that's a great thing to take away from 2020.
Completely. A lot of people have also started business, which I think is such a nice thing to see, earning from it as well. We've also started this podcast, which is a great way to like vent opinions and your thoughts, which we may not have had in this past year as much being in lockdown.
Because Anna, these usual conversations we'd have would be in a bar screaming at each other.
Yes!
And now we can just talk quietly, sensibly about them. We're out for food in a restaurant where we wouldn't get that deep because people would overhear us.
Yeah, so true. It was interesting that you said a lot of people found things moved at a slower pace and they were able to relax a bit more, and you actually found that you had less anxiety about things, and it was almost like if you were an introverted person, you were having a great time because you didn't have to make social plans, or you didn't have to feel pressured to go out and do all this. And more for me, it was missing the social interaction. But I do think as a general point, people that may not have enjoyed social experiences a lot more probably would have loved this time. There's like reverse ends of the scale, isn't there? Like people could have loved it, people could have hated it.
Depending on what they thrived off.
What we found is people who were very kind of socially anxious, in sessions their anxiety score was really low because they weren't actually having to like face the triggers that were making them anxious, so they went into recovery.
I like what you said about it just depended what your personality type thrived on naturally.
Or what you thought if you were an introvert or an extrovert could have even changed in the last year because you've realised what you adapt to. You know, people who maybe thought they loved going out with their mates and getting drunk, maybe you realise they actually didn't.
There has to be the opposite end of the scale. Like, good things have to come out of a bad situation.
That's just you being you and the way that you look at things and come out of things. Someone could have been in the exact same situation as you and not have this outlook on it. That's so good that you know you can come out of bad experiences looking at the positives.
Yeah, I don't want it to seem like my situation was limited to it only being a good situation. Like, I don't want it to seem like I'm being, it was fucking great, like I loved it. That's not at all what I'm saying. It just allowed me the time to do things which I'm so glad that I was able to do.
Yeah.
So, this is going to sound really weird, but when we were first told about lockdown, I honestly was like relieved that I could cancel loads of things in my diary because I'd overloaded myself.
Just like social stuff.
Yeah, for like months. Any of my friends and family that know me know that
I
am.
hard.
Yes, I'm free like next year on a Tuesday. I went through my phone, honestly deleting all my plans, and it was so nice. I realised I was going to have loads of free time and save loads of money. Cleaned out all my kitchen cupboards on that first weekend. I made a banana bread, and I was loving it. And then there was one day where I just realised how shit it was. I was honestly...
How far in was
Oh
this?
my god, I think it was like a month in, and I was working out with my boyfriend in the park, and it was freezing, and we just had an argument just because we'd spent weeks on end together, and I was like, this is just awful. Like, I remember just storming through to the ensuite, ringing my mum, crying like, I can't do this anymore, like it's so shit. It hits people at different points. Like,
but it's mad how unexpected it hits you as well. Like, it will hit you out of nowhere.
So up and down. Loads of my friends said the same. Sometimes we feel really positive, and then other times we like wake up like, this is rubbish, when is this going to end? And for me as well, I mean, I had coronavirus in September. I remember in bed like literally like crying because I was in so much pain in my dressing gown, like literally just feeling like shit. I guess for me as well, it's been a bit of an eye-opener that I don't always have to be so busy. Like, it's okay to have a Friday night where I'm not going out. I can actually just chill out with my boyfriend, and we don't have to go out. We can just have a night in our pyjamas, and that's really nice as well.
Slowed your life down.
Yeah, it has.
In a nice way.
And I actually feel a little bit anxious about things returning to normal.
Yeah, I think this. Like, I don't know how we're going to cope with doing something on a Friday, a Saturday, and a Sunday again.
And then
like
a full week at work. How did we do that before?
Honestly,
We're going to be so tired. Everyone's just walking around like zombies.
Literally, how did we do that? Like, we had such full lives. And one thing I've noticed as well, I worry quite a lot, but I'm not an anxious person, and I sometimes feel anxious when I know I need to go outside or go to the shop. I literally put it off. I don't know why, and I've never had that before lockdown. So even people that haven't struggled before have found some elements of this quite difficult. However you've dealt with it, so whether you've been one of those people that's picked up a new hobby, learnt a new language, you've spent more time reading, you've exercised loads, or on the flip side, if you're somebody that hasn't exercised as much as normal, if you've really struggled to get motivated and get up and do things, if you found it really hard, everyone's done what they've had to do to survive. So there's no right or wrong way to cope with this. You shouldn't feel bad about however you've had to get through this, because it's a very, very globally difficult time we've been thrown into. We've had to just cope, not having any idea how to do it. We've never experienced a global pandemic in our lifetime, so you've had to just do what you needed to do to survive. It's interesting that a lot of people with mental health difficulties, it's interesting how many of them haven't talked about coronavirus at all in the sessions. They've not even acknowledged it. For some people, it's really not changed their world. Their problems are still much bigger than the pandemic.
That's why I thought to mention early on as well how this wasn't about how coronavirus has affected our mental health, because we could do a whole other episode on that. This was more just about the lockdown and the time and the way that life and society has changed. That's so interesting that people's problems were either raised to the surface in spite of coronavirus.
Yeah, exactly. I recently attended an online seminar on anxiety around the global pandemic, and what we kind of learned through that webinar was that anxiety actually comes from perceived threat and intolerance of uncertainty, and both of those things have been massively heightened with a pandemic. So there is a perceived threat, it's coronavirus, and we have a lot of uncertainty, so that in itself generates a lot of anxiety. And for somebody that's more prone to anxiety, they naturally are less tolerant of uncertainty. So as you can imagine, their anxiety is massively heightened. Therefore, it is normal to be distressed and more anxious. And there was actually a study that was conducted last year in 2020 that actually supported the idea that the more information sought around the pandemic, the more anxiety experienced.
That makes sense.
The more we're exposed to constant information around it, the more anxious you're going to feel.
And just the volume of information on the news as well.
Absolutely.
There is no getting away from
There isn't. And to begin with, I honestly checked my phone. I checked the BBC app about 10 times a day. It's the first thing I did when I woke up. And now I only check it once a day when I finish work, like to absolutely limit my exposure to it. Another thing that came out of the webinar was that people that kind of deny that the pandemic's happening, or have developed these really like strange conspiracy theories about
the anti-vaxxers.
But almost as a coping mechanism, just
absolutely.
to deny it exists.
That's exactly it, and it's to manage anxiety.
And that comes from like an anxiety issue.
Absolutely.
Way of coping.
It's you know,
so
we're trying to make sense of it. So actually, as a way of managing our anxiety and trying to understand it, we then develop these like conspiracy theories or deny it's happening, because that then reduces the anxiety.
Coming up with answers themselves to limit
to try and explain.
Well, if I think that this is what's going on and I think this is what the vaccine does, then I don't need to worry about what actually is going on.
I guess once we've got this information, it's then like, well, how do we help ourselves? How do we reduce our anxiety? And one of quite a very simple technique that was suggested was basically just down regulating the information that we do absorb. So that's like limiting our exposure to the news. So as I mentioned previously, like checking the news once a day instead of 20, keeping your sources to kind of reliable sources. So just checking BBC rather than listening to kind of people's view on Facebook or Instagram.
That's a really good point.
And then also on the flip side of that, like managing worry. So, you know, recognizing what is in your control and what isn't within your control, and what you're worrying about. Is it something that's actually happening right now, or is it something you're worried might happen? And if it's the latter, it's about trying to kind of recognise that it's not happening right now. And what we know actually about worry is that about 80% of things we worry about never happen. And also of the things that do happen that we worry about, 95% of people say they deal with it better than they think they will.
Yeah, it's
so
just it's
that's
the
quite
perceived
reassuring
threat that's worse than the actual threat itself
thing
when it occurs.
Because I know I've worried about things before and they have happened, but then it's not been as bad as I think it has been, and that is kind of the nature of worrying.
Like I said, I found my anxiety was a lot worse during lockdown part 1 when I was just exposing myself to all this news. Like I was constantly checking the stats, I was constantly checking, just seeking information. And I found that there was just a point where I just decided I'd had enough. I was only exposing myself to negative news and it was having an effect on my mental health. So I just stopped reading the news and stopped looking at the stats and things. And since then, since limiting myself to that exposure, I felt so much better because I've just put it out of my head. In this situation, that's what's helped me. And I think you've just got to do what's actually going to help your mental health. Like that should be the priority.
It's not going to make you feel any better if you know how many people have been diagnosed or died that day.
Because think how you feel after you read the news. Like I never feel positive about it when I'm reading about coronavirus.
You just got the information
to
change how you feel. So even like you said at the beginning, because there was so much uncertainty coming from even those reliable sources, we still weren't sure whether that was all right. Well, these death figures don't make sense with these testing figures, and then as the testing went up, the figures went up, so that was a big
it was just
theme.
all confusing.
So it wasn't even that we could rely on the media, so even that would almost bring about more anxiety because you didn't know whether you could trust it or not.
And then on top of that, there was all this scaremongering. Like we know, because we have evidence, I'll give you a good example of one in a minute, that the media hyperbolizes and dramatizes everything to make it seem a lot worse than it is, as a method of making us stay at home, as encouraging us to stay at home, and as being as scared of coronavirus as we possibly can be so that we stay indoors. So they'll print something that's dramatised.
They need catchy headlines and catchy top stories tonight. You're going to turn it off if they're boring. They're going to dramatise them. I'm going to get angry.
So, for example, the Daily Mail wrote a story that literally the title was,
"I'm not going to lie, it was quite scary. Jeremy Clarkson, 60, reveals he battled coronavirus over Christmas and feared he'd die on his own."
Literally the next day, Jeremy Clarkson tweeted on his personal account,
"Dear the newspapers, I didn't battle COVID. I lay on my bed reading a book until it went away."
If that's not proof that the media hyperbolises everything, I don't know what is.
We have to take everything with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
Especially more like show busy ones like the Daily Mail, who are very known for twisting facts.
Exactly.
So just be aware that like not everything you read is going to be factual.
Yeah, and that kind of goes with what people post on their social media as well. I think I get that some people find it quite helpful to post, their opinions. But if you're finding that after scrolling and reading other people's stories and posts and everything, if you're finding that you're left then feeling very anxious, feeling quite down, then again, we can't control what other people post, but I think you can control how much you're exposing yourself to those things. So.
And who you follow. There's no shame in unfollowing someone who upsets you. They're not going to take it personally.
Definitely.
It is that school of thought, isn't it, that negativity breeds negativity. So if you're constantly surrounding yourself with people that are moaning or people that are talking about how shit coronavirus is, then you're going to feel shit in yourself. It's really, really hard to constantly be upbeat, staying positive, like thinking positively.
Definitely.
If you're constantly exposed to that, like it's contagious.
Yeah.
Negative thoughts are contagious. No, don't say that.
Contagious. That's a poor choice.
You know what I mean? Yeah, never mind. Deep. I don't think we think about this enough, and it's probably not spoken about enough, but children in such early developmental stages, their social development system, we're in isolation, they're not going into schools and interacting with other children, and early years is so important for their development of their cognition and social interaction, and it's just completely messed up.
There's kids out in the world now who haven't seen people without masks on.
Someone was telling me the story of they had a newborn and they had to stay in hospital a little bit longer because they had a bit of issues. So their first few weeks they were only experiencing people with masks on because they were in a public space.
Really
so now when they see their parents without masks on, they cry because they're not familiar with them. They're more familiar with faces with masks on than they are with actual faces.
I really feel for the kids.
I've had friends that have had babies either just before the pandemic or in the pandemic, and like their experience of being a new mum is like so not what they expected it to be. Like taking their children to meet their grandparents and like meet all their friends. I've still not met one of my best friend's baby. like just because I haven't been able to go
Yeah.
and see them. It's really hard, and I think they were so excited, and they couldn't even have their partner there with them for the scans, and they haven't been able to take them to like baby groups.
They're missing
It's that
out on
loss
the
again, isn't it?
exciting-
It's that loss of experience that's been like really hard for people.
And also it must be quite isolating as well to, obviously the experience of
Yeah.
having a newborn anyway is so difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then to also have all the good parts of having a newborn taken out of your life, like going and having the baby meet all your family, that's completely taken away, and you're just left with, you know, the
Like
hard
the hard
situations
bits,
of
yeah.
having to get up at 2 a.m. and having a
Exactly.
newborn.
But again, they
being
might not
isolated.
know any different anyway, if that's, especially if it's your first.
Yeah,
You would not
true,
know any different, and
exactly.
then whenever if they had a second, that could be
weird.
totally different,
Yeah.
and they're not used
They're
to
not
the
like
nice
prepared. Yeah.
bubble that they had.
Yeah, really interesting.
I think
But
anyone
definitely for
having
children,
a
like-
first experience in the last year would be very, very strange.
People
Uni
at
is a massive
Imagine
Oh my
imagine
God.
not being able to like
That's
go out and meet people.
heartbreaking.
Like that is literally like
So,
what uni is.
You could
like,
have turned 18, say your 18th birthday was
Yeah.
in March last
you've
year.
not, you've not
Never
been
gone out,
Yeah.
never gone on a night out, gone to uni, and it's obviously nothing like you dreamed it would be.
Yeah.
You've chosen to go to a city, not being able to experience it properly. I know obviously it's been shit for everyone, but the people I feel for the most are honestly between maybe 15, 16 and like 21, 22.
definitely.
Because
They've
if
had
you're,
so much disruption.
you know, we're not like old, but like in hindsight, you do think at least we experienced that, and to feel like you're missing out on it at the time would be so heartbreaking
Yeah.
because you don't know when it's gonna be normal again. I know if I was 15, 16 now, I would have really, really struggled. Like, you shouldn't feel guilty saying these things, but I do a bit.
So to kind of round off then, if people are listening at home and they are identifying with some of the struggles that we've talked about, what would you give as some of the coping mechanisms or like things that we can do to navigate this uncertain time and reduce the anxiety that people might be feeling?
Yeah, one of the points we raised today was around, you know, maybe limiting your exposure to things like the news or anything that makes you feel more anxious. And I guess on the flip side of that, you know, if you've identified something that helps reduce your anxiety or makes you feel better, do more of those things. It sounds so simple, but even just having, you know, a post-it somewhere that you can see a list of things you know help you feel better when you're having one of those days or when you're feeling quite low or anxious. For more kind of specific techniques though, more kind of therapeutic ones, there are a couple of really helpful websites that we use a lot in our sessions that actually have really accessible resources that you can access from home. We are going to include those in the episode description just so that you can have access to them after listening today. One of the key websites is just the NHS website, has really helpful self-help resources. Another one that I use quite a lot is called Mood Juice. Again, we'll include details. What I want to reiterate as well is if you've kind of identified with some of the things we've spoken about today, what I'd maybe suggest is taking a step back and thinking about if how you're feeling is having a significant impact on your life. And by that I mean, is this affecting your work or study? Is this affecting your relationships, your sleep, your weight, you know, your appetite? And has this been going on for, I'd say normally for a couple of weeks? That may indicate that there is something a bit more serious underlying that I'd really encourage you to get some professional help with. And to access mental health support through the NHS, the first port of call is your GP. So you just need to book a GP appointment, explain briefly how you're feeling, and then they'll be able to refer you on to your local mental health service. It is free, just be mindful that there might be a bit of a wait list. Alternatively, if you are able to afford private therapy, the BACP website has a directory of therapists.
We'll do another mental health episode, and we want to specifically focus on counselling and therapy and how we found it and our own personal experiences and things that we've learned.
And that will be a bit more sort of generalised to our own
generalised
experience
mental
with mental health issues rather than just in the last year or so.
Yeah, there's a lot we could talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot. We could do an episode for each year.
Exactly.
Hello,
Like
welcome
we
to our
said.
2015 mental health issue.
We could literally talk about this for ages, and it should be something that we could just easily talk about.
We're all very lucky that we're comfortable talking to each other about it. So,
But I think that is only through practice, almost, of like talking about it. It gets easier. The more you talk about it, the easier it gets.
it is, because I think a major thing is that people will push this idea of just talk to someone, you'll feel better if you just tell someone how you feel. That's really, really hard initially, but the more you do it, the better it is going to get.
Definitely.
Just be mindful of who you're going to, because it may be that the person that you go to might not have the headspace. They might have their own things going on. Just asking that question of saying, can I talk to you? I'm feeling quite down. Like, do you have the time for me to speak to you later on today or this weekend, or checking it out with somebody? And some people might not have that person in their life to go to. So if that's the case, that's when I would probably suggest, going to your GP.
Emma, I just want to thank you so much, obviously, for coming on and giving your professional standpoint.
Yeah,
and
it's
your
been amazing.
Opinion, because it's been so interesting actually listening to your experiences of how
I've
your
been really
clients
excited about this episode, and
having a little natter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
it's obviously something you're very passionate about, which
definitely
is nice.
And it's something that I think everybody can relate to in some way. That
definitely
for everybody, I think something about this pandemic has been difficult. We're all in this together, as cheesy as that sounds. Like, we are all literally.
I've seen a great thing which relates to how we're not invalidating different people's experience, because everyone's experience are going to be so different, that we're not in the same boat, we're in the same storm.
Oh yeah, that's so weird, because I heard that the other day and I thought the same thing.
That's so true.
It's nice.
That is so true as well.
Some people are in yachts in Dubai.
Yeah. But we will cover that another time. Yes, we will talk about that.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much for listening.
If you do want to message us about anything we've talked about, join our conversation, join the Ed was like, you say shit too much, and I was like, that's in the title.
Yeah.
We've actually not in this episode.
We've been serious.
Serious chat. Serious shit.
But if you do want to speak to us about anything that we've covered today, you can email us at thefemaleshitshow@gmail.com. Please follow us on Instagram at thefemaleshitshow.
Also, Twitter as well is just @femaleshitshow, and YouTube is The Female Shit Show, which we've got a bit going on there.
We've just had a new video come out on YouTube. As promised, we have decided to show our faces a bit more. So please go check out our YouTube channel.
Also on iTunes, Spotify, please follow and download and subscribe so you will get notified on Friday when the new app comes out.
Because otherwise we'll be nagging you. We'll be nagging you to go and listen to the other episodes, so you may as well just subscribe to them. We don't have to. But yeah, thanks for listening.
Talk at you next week.